If you've ever tried to meditate, you probably had this exact thought. I can't do this, I can't stop thinking. But here's the thing, not being able to stop your thoughts is not a sign that you can't meditate. The moment you notice that your mind is actually full is the exact moment your meditation journey begins. This is a realization you can only make when you try to stop the mind and fail. We can call this the mind prison matrix. This is your life dictated by a mind that was built to run on autopilot. You were supposed to be the pilot, but you forgot and got distracted. Or maybe you don't know how to fly. This is the equivalent to being unable to concentrate. And then comes a point where the suffering imposed by your own mind is so great that you try every means imaginable to silence the noise. You try distraction, suppression, and maybe, just maybe, you actually sit down to meditate. And you fail again. Most people quit at this exact point. They think, I can do this, I can't stop thinking. But let me tell you, this is where the practice actually begins. Because here's the first step of the whole journey, and it is more important than it looks. You have to realize that you can't stop thinking. For if you do not know you're imprisoned, you would never even think of a prison break in the first place. Hi, I'm Alex from Yaoga Space, and today I want to show you the way out. So before I start to explain anything, you should try to feel it for yourself. So let's do a quick experiment. So I want you to close your eyes for a moment and imagine that you are a cat in front of a mouse hole. You are patiently and consciously waiting for your next victim to arise from the shadows. A mouse is any thought that will come up next. And the cat is you as the observer, your essence of pure awareness. For the next few seconds, ask yourself to do one thing only. Watch for the very next thought to appear in your mind, but don't think anything on purpose. Don't push thoughts away either. Just really look out for it. Here's what tends to happen. For a brief moment, nothing comes. A small gap opens. This is the emptiness between the previous thought and the next thought. And this emptiness is essentially pure awareness. The mouse hole experiment lets you taste it. And you managed to taste it because you were so busy watching attentively that your mind simply couldn't think of anything else. Now you probably realized that this state of pure awareness and emptiness was quite temporary, and that it was quite hard to hold and maintain on purpose. After just a few seconds, a thought surely appeared. And maybe you wondered if this was it, or you thought something like, hey, I'm not thinking, oh, now I am. This realization is key. Whenever a thought slips out of the mouse hole and you notice it, and that's a win. You regained your observer state. That's exactly what's supposed to happen, and it is part of your meditation journey. You notice it and you bring your attention back to watching or to your object of meditation. That small movement you just made, catching yourself drifting and consciously coming back, that's essentially the entire practice. That's not you failing at meditation. That is simply the muscle contraction. You just did one repetition. So let me say this plainly. The problem was never that your mind wanders. Every mind wanders. That's what minds do and are designed to do. The problem is that you read these mind wanderings as proof you can't do meditation. It isn't. Taking notice and directing attention back is the right practice for beginners and intermediates alike. And you just proved you can already do it. From here on out, it's just about getting more reps in. You just experienced Dharana, and I want to give you the full picture behind it, because what you just experienced in front of the mouse hole does not stay there. It essentially relates to all aspects of your life, and it has been mapped out and practiced by humans for thousands of years. Dharana is concentration, or bundling your scattered rays of attention onto one single object and holding it there for an extended or prolonged period of time. It is the sixth of the 8 limbs of yoga according to Patanjali, and that placement tells you something important, and that is that concentration is neither the start of the path nor is it the end. It sits right in the middle of the internal part of Ashtanga Yoga. And every step that comes before concentration in the Eightfold System of Yoga exists to prepare you for concentration. And everything that comes after it is built on that core ability that needs to be developed first. So Dharana is like a bridge and ultimately a way to transcend the mind through the mind. Try to imagine Dharana as a lens. An untrained mind is like sunlight scattered across a surface, diluted and impotent. But Dharana is that same light focused through a lens to a single point of focus until it's concentrated enough to be able to incinerate something. Same mind, same capacity for attention. The only difference is whether it's scattered or gathered. Concentration is exactly this and means to consciously gather your rays of attention. It takes a specific kind of intention and energy and is therefore described as active, willful, masculine, or kinetic in the traditional yoga framework. You felt that when you faced the mouse hole. Holding attention takes effort, and the moment the effort drops, a thought will slip by. And that effort isn't a flaw in your practice, and it's definitely not a sign that you're unable or unfit for meditation. The effort is exactly the part of the practice you need to start with. You are regaining control over your mind, choosing where the mind goes instead of letting it fly wherever it wants to. And here's the neat thing. You can aim that beam of attention 2 ways. Outward at something external or sensory, like a physical sensation, a candle flame, or a symbol. Or you can direct attention inward at something internal or mental, like a sensation, visualization, or thought. External concentration is usually the easier access for most practitioners, which is exactly why holding a posture or following the breath works so well to train your attention. But the object we care about most in this video is the hardest one to hold, and that is the mind watching itself, or more accurate, awareness watching the mind. And let me add one last thing on this. Attention is not a depletable fuel you burn through. It's essentially a muscle you build. And if your focus tires after a minute or a few seconds, that doesn't mean you've used up some daily ration of attention. It simply means you found the edge of your current capacity, which is exactly where you need to push through. Every return to the object is one repetition against this edge. You are essentially stepping out of your mental comfort zone. Next, we will explore what the science has to say. This is where our muscle metaphor stops being just a figure of speech. Every time you bring your attention back to the object of concentration, you are training neural tissue. The act of concentration switches on a specific set of circuits in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate. These are the networks that direct and sustain attention. You use them and you reshape them, just slightly, step by step. And every repetition strengthens the circuit essentially the same way a lift strengthens a muscle fiber. The principle is simple. Activation produces adaptation. The circuit you use is the circuit that grows. That's just how training works. Usage drives change. And science actually measured this. People who have practiced for a long time show greater thickness in these prefrontal attention regions that are responsible for your concentration control than people who don't meditate at all. And this doesn't stop at the attention circuits. After about 8 weeks of consistent practice, you can see structural change on a brain scan, more density in the regions tied to memory, emotion regulation, and your sense of self. Just 8 weeks of practice, visible on an MRI. This proves that concentration is a trainable capacity. It's not a heavenly gift you either have or you don't, and you are definitely not stuck with the mind you were handed at birth. Your mind is like a sandcastle. It is just the sum totality of past and present fluctuations and imprints. It has no intrinsic identity or necessity. You simply build the one you want, rep by rep, on purpose, starting today. Dharana is the first step. Obviously, you still need to follow with your actions, and this is how you learn to fly the plane. However, Dharana can only take you so far when it comes to the highest states of meditation. That is because the effort required for Dharana becomes the limitation that prevents you from diving deeper. That is because effort is itself a mental fluctuation and exactly that which you want to transcend in the higher forms of meditation. Dharana must ultimately be transcended, and this is Dhyana, the 7th limb of the Eightfold Path of Yoga, or true meditation if you want. And here's the neat thing, you probably already kind of experienced it. Remember that tiny gap at the mouse hole, the half second of pure awareness before the next thought arose in your mind, or maybe a moment when you were absolutely immersed in an activity like a sports or something like this, a moment you entered the so-called flow state. There was likely a taste of Dhyana. However, the difference is that in real Dhyana, that gap stays open without interruption, effortlessly but intentional, and definitely not by chance. It is no longer a flicker you stumble into, it's a sustainable state. If dharana means gripping your attention onto the object willfully, then dhyana is the moment that grip stops being necessary. Dharana is the effort to hold attention on the object. Dhyana, or meditation, is a continuous, unbroken flow of attention that is natural and effortless. Attention seems to rest on the object by itself, and the sense of I'm the one doing this or I'm the meditator quietly starts to dissolve. You're simply completely immersed and you enter sort of like a flow state. And this is the opposite pole from concentration, where dharana is active and willful, dhyana is receptive and allowing. Where concentration is masculine and kinetic, meditation is feminine and still. It is not passive, as in doing nothing, much rather it is receptive, as in you finally stop forcing and let the deeper states surface and be unveiled naturally. However, here's the catch that traps many practitioners. You cannot get to dhyana by concentrating harder. Dhyana is not dharana applied with more force. It's a different approach entirely. The very effort that carried you this far becomes the thing that blocks you from reaching the next level. At some point, you have to loosen your grip and let the attention you trained sustain itself. And this is why a complete beginner and a very advanced practitioner can be stuck at the same wall for opposite reasons. The beginner might not be able to concentrate at all. The advanced practitioner, on the other side, concentrates so hard that he can't let go. It's the same locked door, but for two different reasons. That was the traditional perspective. Dhyana as an effortless state that you cannot really force yourself into. But let's take a look at what the science has to say on this. Here we clearly have less factual data and proof. With concentration, the ground was pretty solid. We know the circuits and we can measure the change. However, with the effortless state, we maybe have a good story, but definitely less certainty. There's a proposed hypothesis that might explain what happens in the brain during deep meditation, and it's called the transient hypofrontality hypothesis. The idea: in effortless states, the prefrontal cortex, which is the same region you were exerting very hard during concentration, goes quiet instead of working harder. The brain stops its deliberate need to control and shifts into something more intuitive. And you can see this clearly in flow research, for example. When a jazz musician improvises, the prefrontal regions that handle self-monitoring and deliberate control quiet down significantly, and the music unfolds without the player planning a single note consciously. However, when it comes to meditation, the scientific studies tend to produce a mixed picture. Some actually measured that these active control regions were lighting up and not going quiet. So I can't really tell you this is proven, but my guess is that some of those subjects were simply not sustaining true Dhyana yet. They were probably still at the level of concentration. What I can tell you though is that there's a coherent, well-supported account of how a hard-won skill becomes effortless once it's trained deeply enough. And everyone essentially knows this. Walking was once impossible for you too, but today you do it without second thought. No problem at all. Now here's the thing. You never learned to walk your mind. Our educational curriculum doesn't really care about building or teaching how to build the mind. It just cares to fill our minds with whatever has been deemed necessary to become a functional member of capitalistic and modern society. We are result-oriented, not process-oriented. And that's exactly why we fail at meditation. Because meditation is an alive and inward process. It is not a fixed destination. And it definitely is far from control. Still, it is important to bring our attention back to where the science and the tradition actually land in the same spot, even through the uncertainty. And that is that past a certain point, more force stops being helpful, be it with meditation or life in general. You can call it the prefrontal cortex going quiet, or you can call it the mind releasing its grip. It's essentially the same instruction and idea. You cannot muscle your way into the effortless state. And that is simply because the effort of concentration is itself a fluctuation of mind and must ultimately be transcended to realize true yoga. You train concentration until concentration lets go of itself. That is the mind transcending the mind. The pilot learns the controls so intrinsically that eventually they can fly the airplane without second thought. They enter flow state. Let's come all the way back to where we started. I can't stop thinking. I want you to understand what's actually implied by this sentence. For you to even notice that you're thinking, some part of you has to be outside the process, standing back and watching the thinking. That observer is the cat at a mouse hole. The observer is pure awareness, and the wish to silence the noise is the exact impulse to pull your attention back. Therefore, the person who says that he can't stop thinking is unknowingly describing the only two things the meditative path ever needed: a wandering mind and the capacity to notice and return. You were never missing the requirements. You had them the whole time. You just read them as a sign of failure instead of as the starting line. Stopping thought was never the primary and first goal of meditation. The path inwards starts with concentration and is ultimately not about the absence of thought. It is about what is revealed in this absence, the underlying essence of pure awareness that is usually covered by a thick layer of mental fluctuations and thought constructs. As long as your awareness is oriented toward external or internal objects, awareness cannot shine in its own self-luminous nature, and true self-realization remains obscured. Just as on a cloudy day, you cannot see the sky and sun. Let the clouds pass away naturally and the sky will be revealed. It was always there. Finally, there's one more step past Dhyana, and this is Samadhi, the eighth limb of Ashtanga Yoga. Samadhi simply means like the complete absorption of your individual consciousness into the supreme or collective or universal consciousness. Samadhi is a concept that transcends the mind and is a state where like even this effortlessness in meditation, where even the remaining separation between you as the meditator and your object of meditation and the process of meditation, all these distinctions become obsolete and dissolve, and everything is essentially unified. However, as Samadhi mostly relates to the beyond pillar, we will not deal with it here in depth and will dedicate a future video specifically to the different forms of Samadhi. So here's the major takeaway from this video. The next time you sit down to meditate and you experience a lot of thoughts flooding your mind, do not read this as a sign that you're unfit for meditation. Instead, remember our mousehole experiment. You are the observer, and every time you notice that your mind drifts, this is essentially a win. You just bring your attention back, and this is like one repetition for your concentration muscle. This is not a sign of failure, but this is exactly where you start and where you begin your practice. And if you learned anything new today, consider to subscribe to the channel or leave your thoughts in the comments. This really helps the algorithm and helps my channel. I really appreciate it. And otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.